Hello, everybody. It is I, the Desert Viking. I'd like to thank you for tuning in. And today we will be wrapping up our talk on the Kybalion. We will be looking at a summary of the 7 hermetic principles. Kind of tie it all together. So for those of you new here, I am the Desert Viking. I am an esoteric Freemason. And I like to read about, discuss, and practice esotericism. It is a driving force in my life. This channel started as a way for me to document the recovery process from having an asteroid-sized calamity wipe my life out about a year ago. Actually, in about a couple weeks. It'll be an entire year. And that slowly changed as I was given the opportunity to change myself. The channel has reflected that change throughout the course of a year. So I wanted to document it for my own analysis. And it's been a neat journey. And part of that journey was to join a Freemasonic lodge, something I should have done 25 years ago. And it took this incident to make that happen. But regardless, the channel has evolved to be more about esoterics. And one of the questions I get asked a lot is, where do I begin? I want to study esotericism, but where do I begin? I've been involved in esotericism since I was a boy. I've been involved in multiple groups. I've studied multiple branches. I've studied world religions. So it's something I'm very comfortable with, but it's a great question when someone asks, where do I even begin? Because a lot of times we're going to start in the middle. And the middle's not always the greatest place to start. So I do understand the wisdom between not, you can't be spoon-fed this stuff. You can't be spoon-fed at all. But at the same point, there needs to be some guidance as well. And in my opinion, and it's just only my opinion, to let people wander on their own, we're missing out on some people who could have been great. So anyhow, that's kind of one of my life mission statements now. I want to point out before we begin the summary on the Kybalion that, number one, these opinions I'm giving are my own. I do not speak for all Freemasons. I only speak for myself. And I don't speak for all esoteric Freemasons. I only speak for myself. I am not a guru. I do not have all of the answers. I probably have very few answers, to be honest. I know enough to know that I don't know anything. But what little I know, I'd like to share and talk about. But I find that important because, it's easy today for people to find some individual and paint an entire group of people based off of that individual. So we don't want to do that ever. But I want to make sure that it's very clear that I'm speaking for myself here. Okay. Builder's Workshop. That's what this is a part of. The Builder's Workshop is, where do I start? Where do I begin? I started us off with the Kybalion. Okay. I recommend you obtain a copy of this book. It's not a hard read at all. I chose to start us with the Kybalion because when it comes to mysticism, esotericism, the occult, everything ties to hermetic principle and philosophy in some way, when you trace that line back through the ages, you're going to be dealing with Hermetic philosophy. So as such, it is a good primer. In fact, I would say from the Kybalion, there's the Hermetica that you can move into. Pay attention to, check out the Hermetica. Manly P. Hall was he's a very popular author from the early 20th century. That's when he did most of his work. He goes over a broad assortment of esoteric subjects in the teachings of all ages, the secret teachings of all ages. It's a book, a very large book that covers a lot of material shallowly. It is a book I would recommend anyone who's interested in this type of work to pick up. I think I showcased that on a video beforehand, and I'll leave a link on this video as well. But those are very good. Where do I go next? Okay, so I started with Hermetic philosophy because everything's tied to that eventually in some form or fashion, and it provides a good foundation. Now, the 7 Hermetic principles is what the Kybalion went over, and as you can see here, we have some sacred geometry showing those 7 principles. And being in possession of those 7 principles is said to give to us the master key of life, or one of the master keys of life. Now, when I ask what Hermetic principles might mean to someone who doesn't know, they're either not going to know, or a lot of people have this thought that it's about arcane knowledge and lightning bolts flying from your fingers and Harry Potter stuff. And as you found out through this journey of reading the Kybalion through these videos, it's all things that you probably already knew. Most people know the 7 principles of Hermetic philosophy innately. They speak to you in here, in your heart. And you've probably used axioms that derive from a Hermetic philosophy somewhere in your life. You just didn't know. But being in possession of these 7 pieces gives you what is the master key. And it's essentially just 7 guidelines to follow your life around. And if you get into Freemasonry, some of this stuff we do as well with other symbols or other meanings. But it's all very intricately tied together. So looking at those 7 principles, what do we talk about? The first thing we talked about was mentalism, and that was the all is mind, the universe is mental. So we talked a little bit about God, the creator, the grand architect, the great geometer, all of those terms that we grant him. And we talked a little bit about how our world, our universe, is projected from God. From nothing came something. And that can be distilled down through layers. At its grandest level, the universe is made up of galaxies, and galaxies are made up of stars, and stars are made up of solar systems, and the solar systems are made of planets, and on those planets there's life, and in our bodies there's molecules and atoms that look like solar systems. It's all on a cosmic scale, both forward and backwards, but everything is mental. Everything stems from our thought. We have control over our thoughts. No one else. We actively choose the things that we choose to do, to think, the words we choose to use, the actions that we choose to execute upon other people. We actively choose that. If you can learn to control your mind, you can learn to control your life. The second principle we talked about was correspondence. And this is as above, so below. What happens above happens below us as well. We are all connected to the world. And the reality we hold in our mind is reality. So even though the universe is mental and projections of God, that doesn't make the universe or the world less real. There are still laws of physics that we have to apply. And we still have to play by those laws. The third principle of life, of hermetic philosophy, not of life, though you apply it to life, is vibration. Everything is moving. Nothing stands still. Being able to control your vibrations attracts other things of like vibration. The easiest way to compare vibrations is to look at music, because music is nothing more than vibrations that have a very powerful impact on us and our emotional state. We want to be able to raise our vibrations up to attract things around us that are beneficial to us. We want to elevate ourselves off of the lower plane, off of the earth, the earthly plane, and kind of move our way up. The higher you vibrate, I find, the more isolated you may become, because most people do not vibrate at higher frequencies. However, if you can control your vibrations, you can start to control what you're attracting. The fourth principle was polarity, and that is the rule of duality. And we use some simple ones, like hot and cold for temperature, or love and hate. Two extreme ends of the same thing. We want to be off of the extremes. We want to find middle ground. We want to find balance. What I find to be hot, you may find to be cold, and vice versa. It's easy to let yourself slip onto one extreme or the other. You can go from being in love to in hate really quickly. But it's all based off of the same emotion. If you experience fear, what's the opposite of fear? Courage. Instead of destroying fear, you can't destroy fear. Putting your energy into destroying fear is a useless waste of your energy. Instead, you apply the law of polarity. You move away from the extreme end, which is fear, and you move more towards courage, to display courage. Now, fear is not a bad thing. An extreme amount of fear is. Courage we see as a virtue, but too much courage and no fear leads into an early demise. It's like everything in life, extremes are generally not good. And I just used an extreme example right there, right? Never do an extreme. Isn't that extreme? That's why I said mostly. This is a form of alchemy where we are transforming or transmuting ourselves from one state to another. Alchemy is an ancient science, if you will, to which there are many volumes dedicated. Might be a topic we talk about on this channel in the future. If you're interested in esoterics, you're definitely going to run across alchemy. If you're interested in Freemasonry, you're definitely going to hear the words alchemy. So you are transmuting yourself from that polarity. You want to move yourself into a more balanced state. The fifth principle was rhythm. And what rhythm tells us is that nothing lasts forever. This is a lesson I had to learn last year when I was a smoking crater. A lot of people choose to terminate themselves based off of a temporary situation. And that is never acceptable in my view. And I've known way too many people that did that. Horrific times happen. And yes, for those keeping score, there's always someone who's got it worse. But keep in mind, keeping score is also useless because our experiences are our own. And if someone's going through horrific times, telling them that, well, there are other people that are having it worse isn't very helpful. It's a form of one-upsmanship, actually, which in the grand scheme of things is, well, it's hostile. It's a hostile act. So if you're trying to make someone feel better, definitely telling them that other people have it worse is not how you go. As noble as you may think that is. But rhythm says that the pendulum swings. So things may be bad today and you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Life changes on a dime. What we want to do, however, with rhythm is we don't want to be affected by that pendulum if we don't have to be. That's where the master key lies. The higher you climb up that pendulum, so if you think about it, I wish I had a really good example. We're going to use a pen. Okay, pretend this pen is a pendulum and pretend that the blue screen's not filtering it out for you. So as it swings back and forth, the rhythm swings it, right? Notice the lower you are on the pendulum at the very end, that moves the farthest. And as you climb the pendulum, that movement is smaller and smaller. This pendulum represents the lower and upper planes. And as you climb up the pendulum, as you raise yourself up, the pendulum by itself does not impact you as much. Now, there is something called the law of neutrality. And what that does is that basically means that you're trying to, once you've mastered rhythm, you know that the good is going to change to bad and the bad is going to change to good. And what you can do is by utilizing the law of polarity, you can move off the extreme so that when that pendulum starts switching to bad times, which it will, you can neutralize that and stay either not as badly affected or not affected at all. And that comes through rhythm. That comes through understanding that patterns happen and life moves in rhythmic motions. The sixth principle is causation. Cause and effect. What is cause and effect? Well, cause and effect, I think in our world today is very important because today you can't throw a rock without hitting someone who claims to be a victim about something. Cause and effect states that anything that happens has happened because something caused it. There is a cause to it. And that blaming things on chance luck, bad luck, other people, being a victim is useless. Because anything that you find that has happened in your life that's bad or good happened for reasons. There was something that caused that to happen. For example, let's say a house has a tree land on it. You have a house, you buy the house, you enjoy the house, a tree lands on the house. Oh my. The universe is out to get me. Bad luck. Oh, woe is me. Now, don't get me wrong. If I have a house and a tree falls on it, and I used to live in the Midwest, and tornadoes were a thing, and trees fell on houses. It sucks. I'm not telling you it doesn't suck. I'm not telling you that we're supposed to just be totally zen about everything. I mean, I guess we are, right? We want to get to a point where we're not emotionally impacted by things, like to that degree. I think that's my goal. But there's a cause to why did the tree fall on my house? Was it because karma? Was it because I just have horrible luck? Was it because I'm a bad person? Or was it because maybe the year prior there was a flood that loosened the soil And then we had a windstorm a couple weeks ago that weakened the structure of the tree, and then a storm rolled through and the tree fell onto my house. Those things happen. And also it's important to know that every action that you put out into the world, intentionally or not, causes something to happen. It causes a ripple. The smallest actions can have the largest consequences. And I find that those things do come back sometimes, usually all the time. So you're gonna get what you put out in some form or fashion. But remember that with cause and effect, nothing happens by chance. There's a reason to why everything happened. Sometimes it takes getting down into the muck and finding out what that reason was. And sometimes that's not easy. Oftentimes, the answers are not going to be spoon-fed to you. You're going to have to do some digging. The last principle was the principle of gender. And the principle of gender just states that everything has both masculine and feminine energy. It is through understanding that everything has masculine and feminine energy that we realize that the two make up one. That one cannot emulate both. We all possess both of those qualities, but one will be superior to the other in ourselves. And we have to learn how to, number one, recognize this. Number two, to work with it so that we are not handicapped by that lack of energy that we have. For example, for me, I am masculine. I have a lot of masculine energy. I have very little feminine energy. And that can be a handicap for me. When you're unpaired especially, you don't have that counterbalance to your energies, which can be a challenge. And you have to go into that knowing that. So we take all 7 of those principles and we create what's called the master key. And from that master key, we start controlling our own lives instead of being pawns to chance and pawns to other people's whims. And that's the point of starting with the Kybalion. That's the point of cracking that book open and making that the first one. So again, I strongly recommend that you get a copy, and I'll leave a link in the video to it and the Manly P. Hall Secret Teachings of the Ages. They are potent first steps down this path. And everything we discussed, now it comes down to you. Now it comes down to some meditation on your part. Now it comes down to absorbing what you've just been exposed to and piecing that together on your own. You're not going to be spoon-fed on this path. You're not going to be handed all the answers. In fact, there's a lot of obfuscation on this path. There's a lot of hidden things. There's a lot of things are not what they seem. It's a lot of work. But in the end, it's well worth it, in my opinion. So I want to give you my deepest thanks for sticking with this series. And if this was the first video you watched was the summary, well, you got the TLDR of what we've been going over. I do have ideas for the next set of videos. I never really thought about reading on a video. I was always just giving my thoughts. But if reading is something you enjoyed, leave me some comments and let me know. Because I think where I want to head next is to move into some forbidden texts. Yeah. Yes. And what that means is some books that were removed from the Bible. I would like to explore a little area called Gnosticism that I'd like to share. It's always good to get some knowledge from some things that you're not supposed to read, right? The heresies. The Apocryphon of John, I think, is where we're going to go next. The hidden book of John, or the secret book of John, as it's called. We may read from that. It's actually not a large read at all. It's one of several removed texts from the Bible. And when I was seeking last year, I was exposed to Gnosticism, which Freemasonry does have Gnostic roots. There's definitely some things that are pulled from the Gnostic traditions, from the mystery schools that taught that. And in going over those, a lot of bells began ringing off inside of me. And so I think I want to share some of those with you all. And again, we're not getting into the mysticism and the woo-woo, but we're going to be laying foundations out for what I did. And again, I don't have all the answers, and I'm not a guru, and I'm not speaking for all Freemasons or the esoteric Freemasons. I'm sharing my path with you from a foundational standpoint to build something that you can then start exploring from. And there's a ton of other things to talk about, like the Kabbalah, that we're going to get into. But for right now, I want to keep it simple. I want to look into some Gnosticism with you also. Anyhow, that's going to wrap up the Kybalion, and we will be meeting again with Mr. Hermes Trismegistus again, because he does play such an important role in mysticism in general. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was worth watching. I'm looking forward to some comments. Please leave them below. Let me know what you think about the Kybalion. Let me know what you think about the secret teachings of the ages. And until next time, peace profound, stay safe. We'll talk to you soon.